All right.
All right,
Thank you. Bye.
Nicole, you need to mute. She muted her.
Can you mute?
She did. Never mind.
No, she's not muted.
Okay, good evening. It is 7:36 p.m. on Monday, June 5th. I call to order the special meeting of the Common Council of June 5th, 2023. If you will please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, Thank you. Ms. Dixon, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Camacho,
Here.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Ms. Najolski Eichner,
present.
Ms. Smith. Here. Ms. Ayers,
Present.
Mr. Ubelman,
Present.
Ms. Revoluz,
Here.
Ms. Young, Mr. Kite, Ms. McMurr,
Present.
Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan, Ms. Young, Mr. Kites, Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan. We have 9. We have a quorum.
9 present, we have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is public participation. I see no one in the council chambers. Do we have anybody? Oh, Mr. Livingston is, okay. Mr. Livingston is going to address the council.
Mayor Railing and members of the Common Council, Livingston, 23 Crockett Street. This is who's for me. Long time no see. I just want to come up and I want to publicly thank the members of the Charter Revision Commission. We asked a lot of them. We asked them back in September to look at our charter, charter that had not had a significant revision ever since 1913, and they delivered. We asked them to restructure and reorganize the charter into a more accessible and understandable document for our residents, make it a document for the 21st century. They've done that. They have spent countless hours of their time and many evenings and weekends working on this. And, you know, I know when I asked people back in August to September last year, I don't think anybody, even I recognized the amount of work that was involved. And you guys all did it. You did it without complaint. And I think the entire city is indebted to you. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I see no one else in the council chambers that I know want to address the council. Do we have anybody on the in the public that would like on the Zoom that would like to address the council?
No.
Okay, I see 2 attendees, so they're not raising their hand.
No.
Okay, Ms. Cece or Ms. Edie, if you wish to address the council, would you please signify? Ms. Cece is raising her hand.
Ms. CC, you've been promoted to panelist. Please take the mic.
Good evening, Ms. Cece. You now have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay, sorry, there's a little delay in joining as a panelist. I wasn't actually sure if I was going to speak. I thought there might be a whole slew of people speaking, but then when you called me out by name and identified me sitting here at home on Zoom, I thought, well, maybe I'm compelled to speak. I'm not sure if that's protocol or not, but here I am. So now I will speak. Like Mr. Livingston, I also want to express my gratitude toward the Revision Commission. I observed many of the meetings and read the results, and I know that it was many evenings and many hours and a lot of work went into it due to the size of the charter. But I disagree with the concept of what he just said of asking a lot of them, because not that it wasn't a lot of work, but I think that the scope, as I understood it originally, was the definition that's in the beginning of the report for you, that basically the idea was to clean up the charter. And by bringing it into the 21st century, I thought that meant just the reorganization and the language in the charter and getting rid of some obsolete code, etc. And originally we're told that there wouldn't be anything that would pertain to changing the way that government operates. And yet we ended up with at least one item in here that I think significantly changes the way government operates, and that's a recommendation that I'm still actually struggling to understand where it came from. Maybe one of the council people will ask this and get an answer to it. But I think one of the biggest issues you're already aware of that's controversial is the recommendation for a 4-year mayoral term. So if the original goal was really to clean up the document, make it more accessible, more understandable, more readable, more relevant for people, and like I said, to get rid of obsolete things, I'm not sure why we have such a drastic change that does impact the role of government and how the city would operate with having a 4-year term for the mayor. So I hope that you'll consider that. I think that most of you are probably already aware that there was a lot of public input in regards to that particular item. And then I would say that I don't think what made it in here are other items that several people repeatedly had asked to be considered. And perhaps you can consider it when you look at the draft and maybe send it back for more comments. One of which was taking a look at all of the boards, agencies, authorities, commissions, and committees, and considering, are they right-sized? In some instances, 2 in particular, the Traffic Authority and the Police Commission, a number of people from the public spoke that those should be moved from 3-member commissions to at least 5-member commissions. And another ask that myself and others spoke about was to look at the possibility of establishing a citizen review board of the police and emergency services. And I think that that was also not included or recommended or was rejected. I'm sure there's a few other things, but again, I'd like you to keep in mind as you're looking through this of what the actual charge of the Revision Commission was. And for some of the things that are most controversial that made it in here, I hope you'll reconsider them, and I hope you'll consider some other items that didn't actually make the cut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cece. I don't know if there's anybody else. Let me just take a quick look. The only other person I see on the attendee list is Nicole Eady. I don't know if there's anybody else that wishes to address the council. Seeing none, we will close public participation. The next item on the agenda, I'll turn over to Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor Riley. Item 4 on the agenda, it reads as follows: presentation of the draft report of the Charter Revision Commission from Chair Brusha, Vice Chair McQuaid, and other members, and Attorney Stephen G. Bednick. This is our first of several meetings that the council will conduct reviewing the work of the Charter Revision Commission, which, as stated, we're very appreciative of the work that they have done in terms of reviewing the current charter, looking at the necessary changes to make it user-friendly, as well as encompassing input from the community through various public meetings that they've held. And now we're at the point where a report has been submitted as of June 2nd. And the chair of the commission will walk us through some of the highlights that the commission has worked on and allow the council to ask questions initially tonight, as well as we dig deeper into through the various workshops, with the ultimate goal of being in the position to provide action, which I believe, based on the timeline, would be on July 17th. And then at that time, the proper wording in terms of the item going on the ballot will be in the position to present that wording to the public. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the chairperson of the commission to begin to walk us through the submittal level.
Thank you, President Barrett. I'd like to introduce the members of the commission that are here tonight. We have Bonita Raleigh-Watford, and Carl Dickens is with us. Other members had a conflict with this evening, and that was Rick McQuaid, who might be able to join us later. But Tyler Fairborn had two city meetings in Greenwich that he had to attend to. And Angela Wasumi, I believe, is on Zoom. And Michael Witherspoon is on Zoom. Well, finally, we're here. We're breathing, I think, a sigh of relief. It was an awesome task for us to undertake. And I think we have come up with some solid recommendations and ideas for moving Norwalk forward and making our government work a little better than it has in the past. And when we started the commission, I was a graduate of UConn and a government major there. And this is going back into the 50s. And my government teacher used the Norwalk Charter as an example of the most convoluted charter in the state of Connecticut. Now, I'm not a Norwalk resident, so I didn't even know where Norwalk was then, but here I am now, and I can remember him. I can see him saying this and laughing about the charter, and you should read it. I didn't read it at the time, but I certainly have read it since. So it is a challenge. We have presented to you our formal comments along with the changes, a formal summary, and I don't know how detailed you want us to go through it, but I think to get a feeling of how we approached this project is, I think most of us did read the charter as it existed, as it exists, and it is a bit overwhelming. And it certainly takes you back 110 years to when the people that lived in this area decided to become a city, and the efforts that they went to at that time in order to protect their little domains that they had, but to look forward into the future, so that we would have a city. And at that time, apparently the population of Norwalk was about 25,000 people. And I believe Norwalk now is 93,000. And so that demonstrates very clearly how important it is to have taken on this challenge at this time and bringing our document that governs, that instructs us how we govern our city and protect our city and our citizens to 2023. So that was our focus. And the first step that we took under the guidance of our very knowledgeable counsel, Steve Mednick, was to reorganize or to call out all of the different aspects that related to one another into a form that gave us a start on how to look at what was all in the charter, because as you know, or I assume that you know, everything is sort of piecemeal throughout, so there's never a reference area where you can go to find out what you might be interested in learning. It was very confusing. So that was one of our first steps. And then we felt it was very important for understanding of the charter and how to use the charter to create a table of content, which doesn't exist currently, so that you never know where to look for anything. And then along with that was in trying to get rid of the archaic language that permeated the current document, and also to get gender neutrality throughout the document. There was a lot of language changes that needed to take place. So that's just even beyond the content of it itself. So we did focus on that and for many hours and many redlining and crossing out, and hopefully we've got them all of the non-gender neutral items out, and all of the archaic legalese that we felt that we could eliminate and bring us forward to 2023. So with that, would you all have a copy of our transmittal? And I don't know if you want me to read some of it or how you want to proceed. Can you give me some guidance on that, Ed?
I mean, I think that to the extent that this is a public and the public may not have
The document?
materials that we have, I think maybe it might make sense to go
Okay.
to be more detailed.
Okay, so I shall begin. We are presenting the draft report for submission to the Common Council and the City of Norwalk and to our town clerk as required. So pursuant to section 7191 of the Connecticut General Statutes, we are pleased to submit to you the draft report of the Charter Revision Commission in the form of a proposed charter revision for the City of Norwalk dated June 1, 2023. This report is the culmination of a Charter Revision Commission process that began with an organizational meeting on September 21, 2022, and continued with 19 additional meetings, including the first statutory public hearing on October 12, 2022, a second public hearing on April 19, 2023, and a final statutory hearing on May 17, 2023. The final meeting adjourned on June 1 last week, 2023. For 110 years, Norwalk has lived with the remnants of a special act charter and acted almost 50 years before the Home Rule Act. Over the years, the document was subjected to piecemeal amendments, first by special acts and under the Home Rule Act through charter revision at least 13 times. And on the 9th of August in 2022, the Common Council made a decision to create the Charter Revision Commission for the express purpose of reviewing and reorganizing the document comprehensively, not to reform the government, but to rather to restructure and reform the document. The era of piecemeal alterations was over. The resolution charging the commission specifically included two charters: restructure and reorganize the charter into a more accessible and understandable document, both for our residents who expect an accountable and responsible government, and to our public officials who are charged with the responsibility of conducting the business of government in accordance with the provision of the charter, and to determine the relevance and utility of provisions of the historical special acts which form the foundation of the charter to a 21st century municipality, including the roles of the mayor and the executive departments and other public entities. The legislature functions of the Common Council, the budget process, the regulatory oversight, and policy roles and responsibilities of the boards and commissions and certain elected positions established by the charter. The charter of the city is essentially our constitution. It lays out the form of government, the procedures to be followed in creating laws, and the rules that govern the conduct of our public officials. When a citizen picks up the charter, they should be able to find what they are looking for. The current charter opens up with some highly legal language laying out the territorial limits of the city, council, district, boards. Some hold information pertaining to town meetings, the privileges and immunities, and the cities of Norwalk, South Norwalk, East Norwalk Fire District, and the town of Norwalk. Miscellaneous provisions dealing with the building, owning, leasing, using docks and wharves, piers and bridges and property along the waterfront, the care and maintenance of sewer systems. The charter then takes the reader on a 62-page journey through the first, second, third, and sixth taxing districts, which is not exactly a logical starting point if someone wants to learn about the structure of government in Norwalk. Most of these provisions were perhaps useful in the early 20th century. That period in our history was an area of a consolidation and integration of formerly separate communities. However, over a century later, the current charter doesn't tell you much about the way the city is governed. A reorganization and changes on the edges, our commission took the charge of the Common Council seriously. The proposed charter will be replaced with an unsystematic document that the city has used for self-government since 1913. The commission does not recommend any change in the form of government. The intention is to organize the document with an emphasis on clarity, accessibility, and relevance to the times we live in. We are proposing a reform of the document. While you will see a number of changes on the edges, they are designed to improve public understanding of the government, and again, not to alter the operations of the government. Before we get into the substance of the changes, I would like to focus your attention on the organization of the document. I don't know if Council Mednick wants to say anything at this point.
Yeah, you just talk about endnotes and other.
Yeah, sure. That'll give me a water break.
Thank you. Give the chair a little break. My name is Steve Mednick. Thank you very, very much. I've been counsel to the Charter Commission. I've met with you some time ago. We talked about the theories of charter revision. Now we're dealing with the actualities. So I want to thank the mayor and the president, former president of the body, for their courtesies to me in the past year or so, and to the commission. It's been an outstanding commission. You guys did a great job appointing this commission. It was very low on ego and very high on energy and dedication to the task, and it makes my job as counsel much easier. I want to talk to you about for a few minutes, and we'll get back to the chair to walk us through, and I'll be happy to do color commentary as we go through in the evening. As you look at this document, you're going to see at the end of the document a very, very large number of endnotes. What we did, because we were taking old historic provisions out of the charter, is we wanted to make sure that you could look back 10 years from now and see what we did, and what provisions existed that don't exist any longer. And so that you'll see the connection between what's in the charter and what has been taken out of the charter. One of the big endnotes is an endnote that you'll see when we get to the section on the Common Council, on your section in the charter. Under the current charter, there were like 79 separate powers that were granted, in addition to many others, but this was your grant of power, was literally 79 items, most of which are covered by the Municipal Powers Act, which did not exist when the charter was written in 1913. And so if you look at that endnote, you will see the provisions of the Municipal Powers Act next to the sections that were taken out of the charter. And in the body of the document, you'll see a general grant of authority, and you'll see some remaining remnants of the special act. One of the points that I think is quite interesting, as a person who used to be a representative of a city in New Haven, Connecticut, is that you have the ability to regulate guns in the city of Norwalk. It was granted by the General Assembly back in, at some point, I don't know whether it was precisely in 1913, but it was granted. I left that provision in. It's a unique provision. It's a unique power, whether you're going to able to exercise it or you end up at the US Supreme Court. If you choose to exercise it, I think it was a power that was worth leaving in the document. That's the most significant one that was left in, but you will see some of those powers that remain there. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the end notes. I'd be happy to defer to the chair, and I'll be back up when she asks me to do so.
Okay. We'd like to point out that the proposed revised charter begins as it should with a complete, with a couple of tools that should familiarize the reader with its content and reach. The first issue I'd like to address is the provision the commission added called setting the context. While the charter is a legal or local constitutional document and not a reference manual, the commission strongly believed that it would be beneficial to our citizens to understand a few matters at the outset, and which are, what is the function of the city charter? Why was the charter revised in 2023? How is the charter reorganized? What major changes were made in the 2023 revised charter? We have explained some of these issues in the opening portions of this testimony, and will address the major changes as we review each of the articles. So I'll not dwell on the overall organization of the document. The charter is broken down into three distinct parts. Part one enumerates all entities, officials, and processes for the general government of the city, including the Board of Education. Part two includes all of the provisions that govern the first, second, third, and sixth taxing districts. Part three details special action provisions that will be replaced by ordinance once those changes take place, along with a validating legal opinion from the Corporation Council. These transition provisions will be repealed and extricated from the charter by operation of law. The second issue is not a revolutionary provision, yet it is a vital addition to the charter. And that's the table of contents that we hopefully will help everybody be able to find where to go to get the information they want. The point we want to emphasize is that we are trying to make the governing document as user-friendly as possible. We instructed our lawyer to avoid legalese, and we're generally pleased with the result. However, when you are working with language that was drafted at the beginning of last century, it is not always possible to avoid all of the potholes. The context will walk you through the charter. Article 1, incorporation, construction, and general powers. Article 2, construction and standards of general application of the charter of the city of Norwalk. Article 3, elections, electors, election officials, elected officials, terms of office, and other provisions applicable to city officials. 4, the Common Council. 5, the mayor. 6, other elected officials. 7, boards and commissions. 8, department and department heads. 9, education. 10, budget, public funds and finance. And 10 public, and 11, transition and miscellaneous provisions. This is not an achievement that the commission will rest its laurels upon. It's just that we felt that it was the right thing to do and long overdue. A brief comment about the taxing districts. There are no changes in government provisions of the first, second, third, or sixth taxing districts as set forth in Part 2. As I mentioned, Part 2 of the charter consolidates all of the current provisions of the charter, as well as other provisions that were not found in the current taxing district provisions. In the view of the commission, we wanted to allow the reader and taxing district residents to have a place where they could find out about the taxing districts and the role they play in different parts of Norwalk. The commission also thought it was important to spell out the difference between the service districts, called the 4th and 5th taxing districts, which share an historical name with the actual taxing districts first, second, third, and sixth, however, are not separate legal entities with governance and taxing authority. The terms are defined and entitled fourth taxing district, fifth taxing district, and taxing districts. We also further explain the purposes of the taxing districts in a note at the foot of page 111 at the commencement of part 2. While the commission recognizes and believes that the taxing districts are an important and vital cog in building the quality of life for residents of Norwalk, it is not a suitable starting place to gain an understanding of the operations of the general government by having it in the opening comments of the document. Themes and findings of the commission. Throughout the process, the commission was steadfast in its adherence to the notion that the charter should encourage and facilitate public engagement. The proposed revisions address this issue in many places. It starts with the definitions discussed below, where we provide fulsome definitions designed to fully utilize new technologies that were used of necessity during the pandemic. A conveyor of a meeting or a meeting of the public has one place to go to find out what constitutes a public meeting and how public notice, public meeting notice, or hearing notice are defined, all by state law, including the following. Where posted notice can be found, physical and electronic notice, or if required by state or federal law or ordinance, newspaper notice. What is included in the agenda, including content of matters before a body, how to participate in or contribute to public hearings, and what rules apply to public participation, and when a public hearing is required. Public engagement is also addressed in our provisions on boards and commissions, departments, and the budget process. Approved actions of the Charter Revision Commission, Article 1. This article simply restates the provisions pertaining to the incorporation, construction, and general powers of the city while eliminating a number of antiquated special act provisions. Article 2. This article introduces members of the public to the charter document by defining terms and trying to establish a foundation for meaningful public participation in public processes covered by the charter. There are a number of new and innovative provisions. The proposed charter expands the definitions section to include 34 definitions designed to improve public understanding of common terms used in the charter as follows: appointing authority, board of commission, budgeted entity, charter, city, law, majority vote of the council, mayor, meeting or public meeting, meeting or public meeting, meeting or hearing notice, city clerk, capital budget items, common council or council, confirmation by the common council, days, departments, department heads, division chief, elected public officials, elector, 5-year programs of capital expenditures, 4th and 5th taxing districts, general statutes, operating budget, public official or ordinances, public hearing, public notice, referendum, regulations, resolution, special act or special law, state of Connecticut, state constitution, taxing district, town clerk, and vacancy. In sync with the objectives of clarity and accessibility, Article 2 addresses standards of conduct, which are set forth, including the notion of public engagement, equitable treatment of all residents, and the critical importance of conflict of interest policies to avoid the appearance of an insular political system. In addition, the charter will also include rules of order and civility, addressing need for mutual respect in the workplace and decorum at public meetings. This provision is designed to encourage debate and differences of opinion in an environment protected by rules of procedure that are fair and clear. Finally, Article 2 includes affirmations of a policy of open meetings, access to public records, cooperation between city officials, and diversity on boards and commissions. Article 3. This article addresses the city's elected officials, terms of office, and elections themselves. We are recommending repeal of many of the special act provisions dealing with elections in cognizance of the fact that Title IX of the general statutes covers the field with respect to elections of municipal officials. In addition, the commission recommends the elimination of the following city officials at the conclusion of the term of office following the 2023 municipal election cycle, that are treasurer and board of selectmen. Moreover, we are recommending a 4-year term of office for the mayor following the 2027 municipal election. In the same context in which we are recharging a document that was approved in 1913, we need to come to grips with the reality that our city is completely in a very different environment than that of the early 20th century. Norwalk is a municipal corporation with a budget of just under $1.5 billion a year. Like many other municipalities in Connecticut and throughout the nation, we, the people of this city, feel we need to recognize the continuity and steadiness in the operations of the executive functions of government are critical as we cope and face the complexities of governance in the 21st century. We recognize that there are many who look at the 4-year term as a hot button issue, which was rejected by the voters a decade ago. We are keenly aware of the fact we also believe that it is an important issue that requires further deliberate and cognitive debate. If it is not presumptuous, we want to suggest that the Common Council consider making the 4-year term a separate question on the ballot in November of 2023. We are also endorsing changing the term of office to commence the first business day of January following the election in 2025. At the present time, the term commences a week following the election. This change will allow the better coordination and transition between outgoing and incoming administrations. In order to accommodate the extended time between the election and commencement of the term, there will be a transition office for the mayor-elect and restrictions on the outgoing mayor's ability to take actions following the election. The proposed charter also acknowledges the necessity of compliance with district reapportionment for the Common Council and Board of Education members as required by federal and state law. We also include provisions that establish clear standards and procedures addressing the temporary absence or disability of the mayor, including the succession of the council president as acting mayor. Article 4. While there are no substantive changes, the proposed charter recognizes the Common Council as the legislative authority as provided for and required by the general statutes. Moreover, we have recommended repeal of almost 80 special act powers clauses and replacement by the authority granted generally under Title VII of the general statutes, and more specifically, the Municipal Powers Act. On the other hand, we have retained several special act provisions where a unique authority was granted by the General Assembly to the Common Council. And these are the issues that Council Mednick referred to. The Commission made no recommendation regarding modification of compensation with the Common Council, although we believe it is an issue that should be addressed in the near term. We also retain the current referendum system, also referred to as a petition for overrule. Article 5. As with the Common Council, there are no substantive changes for the mayor. We are not saying that the balance of power between the mayor and council does not require further examination. It is just that our focus was on reforming the document, not the government. We did address the organization of the office of mayor and believe that a chief of staff or equivalent position needs to be recognized by the charter. Article 6. This article assembles in one place the other elected municipal officials, including the town clerk, register of voters, constables, and sheriff. Article 7, the commission has recommended a substantial overhaul to provisions of the charter governing boards and commissions, with the exception of expanding membership from 3 to 5 and council approval of police and fire commissioners. We did not focus on the board and commission as such. We did focus on the procedures for creating and operating these entities. At the core of our reform is the notion that the primary role of boards and commissions is to represent the public interest. The revised charter establishes the rationale and underlying legal foundation for public service on boards and commissions. First of all, the charter includes detailed explanations and standards as guide points for board and commission members to carry out the policy, advisory, and/or quasi-judicial or regulatory functions under its charge. Moreover, the charter makes it clear that members of boards and commissions are required to understand the role and scope of responsibility and be informed of the objectives, scope of responsibility, and the operating procedures of the Board of Commissions to which they are appointed. The salient point is that members should represent the public interest and not special interest groups and seek to render decisions on the basis of what is best for the residents of Norwalk. Furthermore, members should take care that deliberations include through research and review of all alternatives on an issue prior to making a recommendation. Finally, the proposed charter clarifies and defines the regulatory and policy or administrative functions of boards and commissions. The notion of conducting open meetings in the public may not seem novel or even necessary, but on the other hand, the pandemic changed the way the public attends public meetings and the expectation for public participation in the future. The proposed revised charter establishes an aspirational standard for Norwalk to lead the way to achieve optimal public accessibility at all meetings. To the end, the proposed revision mandates strict compliance with the requirements of the general statutes unless otherwise permitted or required by law. Utilization of all technology provided by the city so that in-person, remote, or hybrid interactions may be offered to the public at every meeting wherever practicable. Continued migration toward ensuring that optimal technologies are available to all boards and commissions to achieve the objective of public accessibility. The commission has proposed a significant overhaul of the requirements for the operation of boards and commissions to increase participation in the activities of the public bodies. Among the reforms in this proposed charter are the following: compliance with minority party representation statutes, public access, comment, and interaction, including but not limited to public speaking, comment, and any applicable rules and protocols, as may enacted by ordinance or in the absence of an ordinance by the rules of the board or commission. And frequency of regular meetings of all boards and commission in accordance with the ordinance, or in the absence of an ordinance, the rules of the board or commission and the mandatory attendance requirements with enforcement protocols. Consideration of appointments designed to ensure that to the fullest extent possible, the composition of boards and commission reflect the diversity of the residents and the geographic areas of the city of Norwalk. The commission made no recommendation pertaining to the authority or composition of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. On the other hand, we do mandate the following boards and commissions to be created by ordinance: the Board of Assessment Appeals, Conservation Commission, Food Service Pension Board, Board of Ethics, which is appointed by the council, Planning and Zoning Commission, the Pension Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Public Library Board. Article 8, with respect to city divisions and department, the commissions made no substantial changes because we believe it is best for the mayor and the common council to establish the administrative functions of a real-time basis to ensure flexibility for the delivery of services and compliance with applicable federal or state mandates or law. We engage in a reverse engineering function to lay out the current division and department heads. On the other hand, the proposed revised charter established clear authority to organize the government in compliance with the procedures and in conformity with the service functions delineated in the charter. The intent of our proposed revision is best stated in 8.1. The intent of the charter follows. I'm going to just take a water break. The mayor and the council the ability to organize the government in order to achieve a balance of efficiency and service to the people of the city. A delineation of departmental categories for the purpose of mandating services to be provided and functions to be served. In essence, we recommend structures that may be altered pursuant to reorganization plan adopted in accordance with the provision of this charter. However, the powers, duties, and functions defined in this charter must be assigned to officials of the city. The goal is the creation of a government responsive to the needs of its residents, operating under a rule of law that is rigid enough to ensure that services are not ignored, however, flexible enough to find new and innovative delivery systems. The proposed revised charter spells out the appointment and confirmation functions of the mayor and common council with respect to the division chiefs, the CFOs, economic and community development, human resources and personnel, operations and public works, and community service, as well as department heads or other executive level appointees, which are controller, purchasing agent, tax collector, assistant tax collector, tax assessor, assistant tax assessor, health director, deputy and assistant corporation counsels and special counsels, building officials, director of code enforcement, library director, and municipal historian. The police and fire chiefs are also appointed by the respective department-based commissions. The only department mandated is the law department and the head of department, the corporation council. In all other cases, that serve are set forth by functions as well as the executive charged with the responsibility for those functions. The function, executive departments, finance, chief financial officer, the comptroller, purchasing agent, tax collector, tax assessor, economic and community development, chief of economic community development, business development and tourism, code enforcement, planning and zoning, transportation, mobility, and parking. The human resources, chief for human resources personnel, operation, chief operating officer, building management, engineering, public works, recreation, and parks. Under community service, chief of community services, the health, public library, human services, the police department, the chief of police, and the fire department, the fire chief. There are no substantive changes to this provision with the exception of a reporting requirement addressing the issues of disclosing multi-year agreements and other responsibilities pertaining to the budget. The charter recognized the unique statutory protections and prerogatives afforded to the Board of Education with respect to its budget appropriation and other duties and authority granted by state law. The revisions also articulate local functions that pertain to all departments, including the Board of Education. Article 10. As with other areas, there is no modification of the balance of power and authority granted the mayor, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and the Common Council in the budget process. The focus of the charter revision instead on creating a budget provision that is linear and understandable both from the public and the officials who are responsible for the government. We spent a lot of time on this section and quite a bit of public input. The provision starts off with a cooperative requirement for city officials and employees involved in the budget process, including the Board of Education. The charter also defines the operating and capital budgets. The capital budget is also included in the charter for the first time. The commission took the ordinance-based process and moved it into the charter. There are a number of new provisions that don't change the process with one exception. However, establish a framework for the development of the budget. The proposed revised charter is a public record subject to public inspection and public engagement. Under the recommendation, the mayor, common council, Board of Estimate and Taxation, Board of Education, and Planning and Zoning Commission must develop and publicize procedures designed to encourage public participation in the budget process. The Common Council has the legislative authority to enact ordinances to implement these provisions of the charter. This is facilitated by two new requirements, and they are initial joint public hearings. On or before October 1st, these joint hearings are held for the purpose of eliciting comments and ideas from members of the public prior to the development of the operating and capital budgets for the subsequent fiscal year. The joint hearings are conducted by a mayor, chief financial officer, president of the Common Council, chair of the council committee authorized to review the budget, chair pro tempore of the Board of Education, chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a member if the Board of Estimate designated by the mayor. And the second is publication of a budget calendar, not later than October 15th. The chief financial officer is required to publish a budget calendar, including procedural rules in order to inform the public of the significant milestones in the budget process. The remainder of the article walks the reader through the linear operating and capital budget processes. Article 11, under provision, there is a required review of the charter within 2 years, and this is and every 5 years thereafter. The short-term review allows the city to look at structures, procedures, and operational issues that were not reviewed by the 2023 Charter Revision Commission, miscellaneous and that we had recommended. We might want to really talk about that section as we get into a discussion. Article 12, this article includes the historical taxing districts. As we have stated, these provisions were not touched with the exception of gender neutrality and capitalization of defined terms that apply to the entire charter. On its title page, Part 2 includes the following statement. Part 2 of this charter recodifies all of the current charter provisions pertaining to the first, second, third, and sixth taxing districts. The first, second, third, and sixth taxing districts as defined in 2-2B above and as further set forth in Articles 12 of Part 2 of this charter are quasi-municipal corporations, bodies, politic, or political subdivisions of the state. The first, second, and third taxing districts are funded through their respective utility revenues and thereby impose no separate district tax, while the sixth taxing district levies a tax for the services it provides for its parks and beaches, garbage collection, library, and fire service. The 2023 charter revision did not embark on any changes in the provision of this charter other than some minor edits, including the effort to engage in gender neutrality, capitalization of defined terms, and placement of provisions that were in the body of the charter and were aptly placed in the provisions dealing with the taxing districts. The commission believes that Part 2 should be thoroughly reviewed by the governing bodies of the taxing districts. As the reader can see by reviewing the annotations, the commission itself did not make any changes other than gender in the capitalization in this section of the charter. We will retain the internal references to the charter in effect prior to the effective date of 2023 revisions, year and after referred to as the prior charter. The provisions of the prior charter are referenced in the endnotes. We respectfully would suggest that the leaders of the first, second, third, and sixth taxing districts review these provisions to examine whether it would be worthwhile to include changes in the 2-year review mandated by the proposed revised charter. They need to do this carefully in order to preserve the integrity of the special act authority. However, the commission is of the belief that there are many provisions that no longer serve any purpose. Article 13 and 14, the historical provisions in these articles are left intact because the commission could not decide what to do with them and there was no rationale for repeal. On the other hand, there are provisions such as the council districts that will be replaced by new districts following reapportionment and the functions of certain department officials whose functions are better left to the ordinance. We look forward to our workshop over the course of the next 2 weeks, and we feel free to call on us, council, with any thoughts you may have. So the rest of it, several pages are all of the references that we have alluded to. Steve, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was up there with Fidel Castro's longest speeches. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for the stamina and for the presentation. Thank you. It's been an honor.
I
working
hung in
with-
there
An honor working with Patsy.
and they stayed awake. So
It's been great. And I'll defer to the other members of the commission here or on the screens if they want to say a few things, but there's a couple points I wanted to make, if I may, and then we'll be happy to answer questions, and we look forward to the workshops as we get into it. Can I just say one thing about the workshops, Mr. President, if I may, that what I would suggest is as you start looking through this document and you think about the things that are priorities for you, I think you should let the president know what they are so that as we go through the workshops, we can have some sense of what it is that you want to talk about at those workshops. And we'll be happy to provide you any backup materials that we have that we developed as we were going through this charter. So it'd be useful to know in advance. I'd rather have the materials before than to say, I'll get the materials that you're asking about. So it'd be useful as you have issues, get them to the president. The president will let Patsy and myself know what those are, and we'll be prepared to deal with the workshops in a prudent manner. I put a sticky here. Why did I do that? I wanted to talk about the multi-year agreement provision in Article 9. Just briefly, in this room, we had a meeting with counsel for the Board of Education and many members of the Board of Education, because we thought it was important to, I've proposed these in many of the charters that I've dealt with around the state. You want to make sure that while you don't have line authority for boards of education, the city just approves the educational appropriation under 10-222. The important issue for you and for the Board of Estimate and for the mayor is to know what they're doing and to know that they're doing things in a legal way, because there's plenty of case law. While they have their independent jurisdiction, there's plenty of case law that makes it clear that they have local functions as well as state functions. And under those local functions, complying with budget requirements, dealing with procurement, dealing with a whole range of other activities, they, like any other department of the city, have to comply with those activities. And what we did is we narrowed in on the multi-year agreements. Multi-year agreements is a trouble spot I have found throughout the state with boards of education, because what they end up doing is they end up signing one-year deals with options to renew, with extension agreements. Those are not one-year contracts, those are multi-year agreements. In a place where there's a good balance between the Board of Education and the general government, they tend to come to the council, the mayor and the council, for multi-year agreement procurements and to get the approval up front for the multi-year procurement. And they then have the authority to enter into the multi-year contract. But it's important for the general government to know what the Board of Education is doing on a multi-year basis. One of the bases of the case City of New Haven versus New Haven Board of Education, which made it clear the capital budgets are city budgets, not Board of Education budgets. It's one that I was involved when I chaired the Finance Committee of the Board of Alders when they sued us, and I was Corporation Counsel when we won at the Supreme Court. It's a very, very important principle, and it's just a real strong accountability standard. The second point I wanted to make in here is that we have in the throughout the document, you're going to see what we call cooperation clauses. And the idea of the cooperation clause is not that it gives you, a draconian authority to say that you have to do this, or to subpoena somebody and say you're not complying with cooperation, but it's to establish a constitutional standard and a leverage point so that all the branches of government, the mayor works with the council works with the mayor, that all of you work with the Board of Estimate, you work with the Board of Education, and all the departments work with the elected officials who were responsible for governing the community. And that's one of the points I wanted to make on cooperation. We had one in the Board of Education section, which they thought was targeting them. We ended up not going forward with the cooperation clause there because they're a department like any other department. They're covered by the general provisions of the charter. And we made that clear that it was not intended for them, but that they are covered by it. And so I wanted to point that out as well. The next point was a point that Patsy thought we should come back to. I hope you don't mind. I jump into it now.
That's fine.
And this is the rationale for the 2-year charter revision. This commission has done two things. Most communities have a 10-year requirement that you have to do a charter revision every 10 years. This commission, not with my advice, but it's not a bad idea. This commission came in with a 5-year requirement that every 5 years, this will be after the 2-year cycle that you have coming up in 2 years, if this is approved, that you should look at your charter. You may have nothing to do in a 5-year cycle. I also think you should be looking at your ordinances on a fairly regular basis as well. But is with the charter, you shouldn't go too long. You shouldn't wait 110 years to do a comprehensive revision of your charter. But hopefully you won't need another comprehensive revision of this charter. The idea of this charter was to give you a document that you can look at, understand what you have, and then try to figure out where you want to go with your local government. And so there will be mandated within 2 years a charter revision. My recommendation to those of you on the council and those of you who are going to be returning next year is that you begin, not that you convene a charter commission immediately, but you start thinking and working with the mayor and start thinking about what it is you want to address. What are the issues that need to be tackled, that haven't been tackled, and start doing it in the same way a charter commission may be doing it, whether you set up a select committee or a combined committee of executive and legislative and Board of Estimate members. However you do it is up to you, but you need to think about those things, and you need to bring the kind of support system that you have that has worked with this commission, because if you just give it to a charter commission, they're not going to have time. Even if you give them the full 15 months, they don't have time to do the analysis and to build the consensus. That's the important thing, is that if you're going to make a change, any change in the structure of government, the size of the legislative body, the composition of the legislative body, the relationship between the mayor and the legislative body, the relationship with the Board of Estimate, all those things require some thought. They require a recognition of the culture of your community, the folk waves of your community. And so you just can't give it to a charter commission. You really need to think about it, and you really need to establish the foundation for those changes. So I wanted to explain the 2-year, and one of the issues that propelled us was the issue about the compensation for the council. We think that's an issue that should be addressed, but it probably should be addressed in the context of the overall revision of the structure of the government. The last point I want to make, I think, is the Articles 12 and 13, or 13 and 14 of the charter, the historical provisions. I ask that you take a look at those provisions. You folks work with the document, you work in the government, you have a former member of the Board of Estimate on this body. Is there a former member of the Board of Education on this body as well? Or maybe there is or isn't. The mayor I know is on the Board of Education. I think you should look at those sections, because those are sections of the charter that we couldn't quite figure out what to do with. And if you have some thoughts on that and ideas on that, that's not the final word. if they should be repealed, you should recommend that they should be repealed. Take a look at those sections. The other part of Article 14 are I was calling them the sunset provisions, but they're not really sunset provisions. They're going to be transition provisions where we have kind of the job descriptions for some of the department heads. We believe that those should be moved into the Code of Ordinances. We're doing that in New Haven, literally, as we speak. Meeting with all the department heads or half the department heads tomorrow. And the objective is in New Haven, you have Eisenhower era. Does anybody know who Eisenhower is? Eisenhower era qualification standards for department heads in the Biden era, in the 21st century. And so we're moving them out and having them adopted on by ordinance. But we have standards in the charter so that they have to be in accordance with best practices in the field. And they have to be done with the procurement officer in the city. And so those types of things need to be looked at. And I just want to give you the rationale for that section of the charter. That's it for me on affirmative statements. Do any of the other members want to say anything? Okay, thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Who shall I ask the question?
Yeah, ask the question, we'll figure out who will answer it. Thanks.
So I think there was a mention that the capital budget process was previously in ordinance and was removed and now is placed in the charter. What was the rationale for that?
Steve?
Happy to do that. One of the first things I did in government when I was a little boy in New Haven, when I was elected to the board, there was no capital budget process in our charter or even in the ordinances. And one of the first things I did was write a capital budget ordinance back in 1982 or 83. There was no capital budget process in your charter. I recommended that you do establish it in the charter. You can take a look at it. If you think it's too detailed, we can scale it back and move some things back to the Code of Ordinances. But I think that the capital budget process is as important as the operating budget side. And I thought that both sides needed to be balanced in the charter. And, as a former member of the Board of Estimate, more than happy to hear your advice and counsel on both sides of the budget, whether we've been too detailed on either side. What I want to make sure is that the charter is detailed enough so that the bodies that operate under the charter, your former body and your current body, have guidance and direction, and that the public is protected by those guardrails, but not too detailed to lead to a quagmire. So that's what I'd ask you to look at there. So it's not written in stone, but the concept was to make sure that the capital budget was placed in the charter.
And on this point too, there were a lot of comments of people not understanding the process and the timing of it. And having attended many capital budget hearings through the years, I understand that frustration. And our goal, one of our major goals, was to make the charter as user-friendly as possible so that our constituents understand how we function and can participate in the process. That was the rationale.
I've got a series of like maybe 4 questions, or if you want to go round robin, or I can just ask all 4 now.
Let's see, does anyone else have any immediate questions? Hearing, seeing none. Continue.
Could you explain what the cooperation clauses are and what they mean? What's the functional result of them?
Yeah, what I have found, the way they've been used in the communities that have adopted them over the years is that it gives a member of the legislative body, because most legislative bodies do not have subpoena authority. It's something they should have, but they do not have. And so the cooperation clause gives a legislative body, gives a body like the Board of Estimate, something to point to in the charter that gives them the authority to say, look, we have to work together on these matters. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is if you're on a board or commission, you're sitting on the planning board, you're sitting on the zoning board, you're sitting on the police commission, whatever it may be, the cooperation clauses are very specific that if you are dealing with a department, if the department's dealing with the commission with the department, you work together. Doesn't mean you agree with everything. You can vote everything down that the chief comes up with, that you have, a responsibility to deal with. But everybody needs to cooperate. And so it's a broad, I don't want to call it a kumbaya clause. It's not a kumbaya clause because I think it does merit some serious serious compliance. I think it is something you can ask people to comply with. I don't think we have any penalties for non-compliance with the cooperation clause. Maybe it's something to look at in that regard, although, discipline for elected officials and discipline for appointed officials, some are governed by collective bargaining agreement or by other provisions of the charter. But the idea is to provide some level of suasion and leverage for the entities involved. That's the intent.
Okay.
And for the members of the public to say, look, your charter says you're supposed to cooperate. Why can't you just get the information from one department to the commission? So that's the last element of it.
Okay, thanks. There's a 5-year review of the charter in the charter, but there's an initial 2-year review. What's the purpose of the initial 2-year review as compared to the ongoing 5-year reviews?
There were a number of issues, which I think the chair talked about.
And we
whether it was-
didn't address and, wanted to, but there wasn't enough time and energy or to do that.
And it went beyond scope. I think we were trying, look, I'm going to tell you, we did things in this charter, so I don't want you to think it's an anodyne document. But in terms of big structural issues, we didn't address the role of the mayor versus the council, the role of the council on the budget versus the board of estimate. Those issues were not addressed here at all. We just didn't have time because from my first meetings with your former president and with the mayor over a year ago, it was evident that the real heavy lift was fixing the document so that you as a governing body would have a document you could work with. Starting to tackle all those other issues was really, really difficult. The commission came up with this notion that you should have an early charter revision, at least in 2 years. But as I indicated a moment ago, I think you need to do some due diligence before that occurs. So I think you should use the good part of the next 2 years to figure out what you want to do, which means you need to hit the ground running after the election to begin to think about what it is you're doing. You may even hit the ground running before this is adopted, but I would hope that you would all be hitting the ground to get it adopted in November. Is the first priority, is to get this charter approved. But that was the theory of the 2-year review. So we can look at these things.
One last question. I believe you moved some items, or at least one item that you mentioned. I don't remember which one, but you moved at least one item from the charter to ordinance. And my question is the issue of council compensation, of the compensation for council members, that was not moved to ordinance. Presumably that's left for the next 2 years to evaluate and to determine whether or not it should go into ordinance.
Well, here's a law on council compensation, and it's a law that I don't understand as a former member of a local legislative body, why local legislative bodies are left out of the loop. And especially in Norwalk, with a local legislative body has no line item authority in the budget. It makes absolutely no sense where you have a legislative body that doesn't control its budget. And that is all legislative bodies in the state of Connecticut. If you raise the money, if the mayor were to propose an increase in compensation and the board of estimate were to go along with it and the council sets the cap, doesn't play much of a role in terms of eliminating those lines. If that's in the budget and it's approved and signed by the mayor, that provision of the budget has to go to referendum by state law. It's nonsensical. It makes when I saw the law, I was absolutely astonished by it. I was an alder at the time, and it's existed all these years. And the reason I ended up addressing compensation for legislative body members in a charter is if you establish the baseline in the charter and it's approved at referendum with the whole charter, then you don't have to go back. If you have a cost of living adjustment and the voters have approved the cost of living adjustment, when that cost of living adjustment is adjusted, it's done in accordance with the action of the voters that approve the cost of living adjustment. No one has challenged that. I've done that since the early part of the 21st century, starting in Hartford and Waterbury, and it's never been challenged. in any system because it was passed by referendum. I think it would be I'd be very surprised if the court would reverse that. But that's the reason I try to address it in charters. And again, it's an issue. This is before you now, an issue you're going to be looking at, and you'll have to make a determination on it. But you have that ability right now to raise compensation, but would have to be on the ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nice seeing you.
Yes.
Thank you, President Burnett. And huge thanks to the Charter Revision Commission. This is a tremendous document. This is a tremendous amount of work. I can't believe just how much more readable it is even going through it. And I have about 1,000 small questions, but I will obviously save those for the workshops. I did just want to ask, you have recommended the elimination of the Board of Selectmen and the Treasurer, but not some of the other positions. I think the sheriff and constables and some other things that have come up in the past as positions potentially to eliminate. So I just wondered if you could speak briefly to
Sure.
the decision making.
Yeah, we did have a public meeting with all of those people were all invited. And most of the selectmen said there's no function. That's a hangover from being a town and not a city. And so they have no function and they suggested that we eliminate it. The constables came and they function, and it was important that we maintain that. The treasurer is basically has no function and didn't come to speak to us, although it was invited. And the last one is sheriff. And I think we put in that would end in 2025. I'm not sure.
The sheriff continues along with the.
Well, we discussed that. But the sheriff did attend a public meeting and asked that it be continued. And so we did.
There were functions, I think, that was determined that there are sheriff functions that are unique
Or
functions.
like the constable,
Yeah.
it was equal to the
Along with
constable.
constables. that
And,
they were
you
kind of
know,
parallel.
maybe we reduced how many constables. That was something we talked about at length. Because there's a practical piece to that, in that the amount of lines that on the ballot requires that you turn the ballot over.
Mhm.
And so if there were fewer constables, you would not have to turn the ballot over to vote. So that might be something that you look at.
So those positions will be on the ballot this November because charter is on the ballot this November. So they will have one more term in office.
Thank you very much. I very much look forward to working with all of you on all of this really terrific work. And
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the time.
Councilmember Josh Goldstein.
Thank you, President Burnett. I second what all my colleagues say with the unbelievable amount of work, and we're just getting into it. But just a couple things. I saw that there are a lot of, I think there's a page where it's specifically on page 9 of the transmittal letter where you discuss how the number of boards and commissions have to be created by ordinance as a result of them essentially being transferred from the charter to the ordinance. Having been on the ordinance committee and Hal was having been involved with ordinances, and I'm looking at my friend Tom Livingston over there, ordinances take a lot of time. And this is a lot. I mean, this is 8, and that's probably not even the full scope of it. I guess, first of all, what happens to, if assuming the charter is adopted, does that mean that the Planning and Zoning Commission, for example, legally ceases to exist until we create an ordinance? Or is there a mechanism to keep it going until?
Steve, you best.
I think most of those are by ordinance already. I will look at that again.
That might be a typo.
No.
No?
What the concept of it, council member, is that I think they're already ordinances. I mean, they're not moving out of the charter. And a lot of my charters, the way we do it is if they're actually in the charter, you move them out of the charter gradually. So you basically leave the charter authority there and you establish a transition provision by which time the council has to approve the ordinances. I think these are already there. What we are trying to establish in the charter is that these are necessary commissions and they should remain in existence by ordinance. I do believe most of them, I'll double check it, but I believe most of them are adopted by ordinance already.
I also would just had a question about, there's a couple of notes about public participation and a desire or that there's I think it was that in various boards and commissions that are designed to increase public participation. Can you just explain a little bit about sort of what mechanisms there are to increase it? And I'm not sure by what does increase mean?
There were a lot of comments from the public on not having notice soon enough of meetings and confusion on dates and timings and the website and that kind of issue came up. And so that's part of the articulation that we felt we need to really focus on that. And our goal for all of us was to be more as inclusive as possible for the public. That we felt that was an important thing to articulate.
Thank you.
It's a relatively light touch in this charter.
Okay.
We addressed the issues of diversity. But again, a fairly light touch there. In a lot of other charters, there are very serious recruitment provisions, real mandates for the mayor and the town clerk, the city and town clerk, or the city clerk and the town clerk. You have the two positions here to aggressively go out and recruit people to get on boards and commissions. But here we are just trying to establish the rules of the road. What does it mean to be on a quasi-regulatory body? What does it mean to be on a body that's attached to a department? So we define those things more carefully in here to allow members of the public to see what it is they'll be doing if they get on. But it's a fairly light touch. And we did, a lot of the provisions are in the notice sections that really lay out the quality of notice. And also public comment provisions and things like that to encourage public participation at meetings, if not being on a board, but as a member of the public appearing before a board.
I appreciate that. And I have one more, which is about the 4-year mayoral term. It's obviously, I mean, we've talked about sort of controversial items versus non-controversial items, but there are, if I'm not mistaken, there are many municipalities, especially municipalities of Norwalk size or bigger, that have 4-year mayoral terms. I guess my question is, are we, in your research and determination, did you find that Norwalk's 2-year term was sort of out of step with other cities? Sort of how does Norwalk?
We had a meeting dedicated to just that, and a council invited 3 people from I forgot all the cities that they were from Hamden, Steve.
I don't remember, it was Hamden, Danbury, Waterbury was there.
Bridgeport, Stanford.
No, not Bridgeport.
It wasn't Bridgeport and Stanford, but it was New Haven, I think was there as well.
And we discussed that concept.
Haven has a 2-year term.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Hartford has 4.
Hartford has
Yeah.
4.
Stanford.
Waterbury has 4. Middletown has 4.
No, Waterbury's 2, I believe.
Waterbury.
Waterbury's 2.
Stanford's 4 though.
That was where Neil O'Leary's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 4 for mayor, 2 for board. of Aldermen.
No, I'm saying that's where Neil Leary is. It's 2 or 4.
The
And I think Waterbury's 2, but I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I'll take a look.
Yeah,
at it.
but
The trend.
the commission and the commissioners that are present can also address it, but we were all in favor of a 4-year term. The question came up at the end, pretty much the end of our work, will that impact the passage of the whole charter? And so there was a recommendation to move it out to 2027 so that this charter would pass, because we felt it was very important to get the charter passed. But the comments and consideration was that it was important to go to a 4-year term, and that we are a large business that we run, basically a public business, and to plan any major construction. I've been in the construction building business for 50 years, and I know what it takes to get any project, conceptualized, impacted, budgeted, and executed, it takes takes a lot longer than 2 years. So that we felt we want to move in that direction. But there was concern, there were pros and cons from the public as well. There were people supporting it and people not supporting it.
Thank you.
So if I may, our Commissioner, Raleigh Watford, just gave me the document I gave them, and we'll get it out to you as well, which lays out the standard. New Britain has a 2-year term for mayor. Norwalk is a 2-year term for mayor. West Hartford's 2 years. West Hartford's a council manager form of government. Fairfield, which is a little smaller than you, but not that much. It's a board of selectmen, but their first select woman, and the board of selectmen has a 4-year term. Hamden is moving to a 4-year term. They made a judgment. I was their counsel. We did it 11 years ago, and we backed off from the 4-year term because we thought it was a politically difficult issue. 10 years later, and then 11 years later, because they had a failed charter in there, they didn't put it as a separate question. They just went with it. But what they did was they staggered it so that the mayor, who was mayor at the time of the adoption, they could not accuse us of creating something that was beneficial to the incumbent mayor. So they did it 2 years in the future. In this case, this commission went 4 years in the future. So Hamden is moving to 4 years. Bridgeport has 4 years. Stamford has 4 years. Waterbury does have 4 years, mayor.
You do.
Mayor, 2 years for the Board of Alders, which is normally the way I recommend it. Danbury's still at 2 years. New Haven is at 2, but I can tell you, I'll be there Wednesday night. They are now moving to another 4-year term in New Haven. Hartford has 4, Greenwich has 2. So that's, and I'll make sure you get this document.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, President Burnett. First off, like many of my colleagues have said, thank you, commissioners, council, for the work that you guys have done. This is fantastic. I'm looking forward to diving into it, to the workshop that we're going to have and discussing this more in depth. And just a note, I think the National League of Cities, I think it's 45% of the cities in the United States now are at a 4-year term. And I think there's 30, it's in the 30s for a 2-year term. So I do support this, and I like sort of the way you've styled it and the work that you've done on it and listening to the public on it. A couple little things, and this is not, I have a question about the change of office to January 1st. And then I'm reading in the budget now that we're using hard dates, not the first meeting after the third moon of the side, or whatever, that we have a meeting. So it says that the mayor would be presenting the budget to the council on the 22nd, and on the 28th, the council's voting on a appropriations cap, if I'm reading that correctly in there. Now, that with a January 1st start date of a new administration, I think is pushing that process up quite a bit. And I'm curious to know what the rationale was, what the thinking was on those dates pushed up then.
Well, I will say this, 2 things. One, that the other thing we have is a transition office. Part of the concept of the transition office is not only to provide an office for the incoming mayor, if there is a new mayor, if there's the incumbent mayor reelected, no need for a transition office, except there's still a need for transition once we change that date for members of the council and boards of education. And we're very specific in the document to make sure that members elect get all the budget information from the time of their election to the time of their inauguration. So that 2-month period, they're not without information. And there are no actions really taken by the council in November and December that are interrupted by the delay in the commencement of the office. We should take a look. I'll be candid with you. We like to think we thought of everything. We did the budget provisions in March. The concept of the transition came in April or May. And so we should sit down with you as a council, probably with the CFO and the mayor and others to take a look at those dates and see if those dates need to be
I
realigned.
think it warrants visiting that
Yeah,
second.
I'm being honest with you
I
that,
mean,
yeah.
we're gonna be in a workshop
Yeah.
and have these discussions. It's something that in my first initial, blowing through this
so it's very,
quickly, those dates stuck out to me. And
Very-
I know that
yeah.
my experience in 4 years of doing this has been that period of time can be, can be a little bit of troubled water. So
no, I think that's absolutely merited. And I'll point out one other thing that maybe a lot of people don't know. Back in 2018, Speaker Ritter, I've never talked to him about why he did this, but it's a very ingenious concept. Got legislation through that allows legislative bodies to alter their charter without going through a charter revision process to deal with the dates of the budget process. So you have the ability, if these dates do not work, and let's try to fix them to make sure that we have dates that everybody has a consensus on that will work. But if those dates don't work, if we go through and realign the dates to change the current dates, you do have a safety valve, and that is a 2/3 vote to change your charter provisions for that purpose only, changing the dates in your charter. You can't change the structure. You can't come in the 11th hour with the support of the mayor and get rid of the Board of Estimate. But you can change the dates that things have to get done. Otherwise, if you want to get rid of the Board of Estimate, you need to go through a full charter revision again. But it's a very interesting process, and it came in just pre-pandemic, which is interesting because it's the kind of thing you would have thought about during the pandemic. In fact, that's when I found out about it, really, when I was advising the governor on executive orders. We realized you can actually change the dates with a 2/3 vote of your council and not run into problems. This is before all of this technology was really in place. It's a great concept.
one other question that I have is your Article 14, sort of these stragglers that got pushed to there. You mentioned in there that they need to be addressed either by ordinance or, and then that ordinance becomes force of law and they come out of the charter at that point. But is there a time frame? Is there a trigger element on them to actually clean them up? Is there?
I'd be happy to talk to you about that. I will give you, I like triggers, didn't put one in here. If you think that this legislative body has the discipline to live with the trigger, I'm really happy to work with you on developing a trigger. I won't name the community. It's a community I know quite well. Where 11 years ago, we put a trigger in their provision to rename all of the department heads or to move all the qualification standards to ordinance, not done. And I've been talking for the last 6-7 years. I said, let's not get to charter revision and have this provision still in there. It is still in there. We now have a resolution to get it done. I think triggers are great. I just hope legislative bodies abide by them. So
I guess my
let's talk about it.
my fear rests in the fact that we're dealing with a document from 1913 right now, which has pushed us to do this. And, do we end up in another situation 100 and some years from now where these things are still floating around?
I agree with you completely.
That's my argument.
I think it should,
That's probably why we're suggesting a charter revision every 5 years, so that it's a forced, review
Okay.
to deal with those kind of things that, times change, world changes, so.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for the work that you guys have put into this. I look forward to robust conversations moving forward.
thanks for your observations.
I did have one. Someone has a hand raised?
No, I don't know. I'm just saying. You should check.
I did have one question on page 6 of the transmittal. You allude to the item of the 4-year term for mayor to be as a separate question on the ballot. Were there any other items that might have rose to the level of discussion or consideration to be a separate ballot question?
I'll defer to Patsy and the members. I can't think of any, but I'll defer to the members. If there are any other?
Not specifically with that concept that I recall. You folks? Well, the salary, the other issues were, we go to a 4-year term for mayor, do we do 4 years for the council? at the same time. We spent a lot of time talking about that. And our decision was that we felt staying with 2 years for the council at this time was sort of a potential referendum on the mayor's position. If people were uncomfortable, it was sort of a safety valve. So that is why we went in that direction for that.
On the 2-year term for council, how would it be structured, the election process? You have a 4-year term for mayor.
You know what, we got it, that became sticky.
Pardon me?
That became sticky of how
I
you do that.
guess.
Yeah,
Because you don't want to have an election cycle where, 2,000 people come.
right.
And that
And
could
you're,
very well happen.
yeah, and you have them, we talked in terms of staggering it and to that point.
I did notice a little bit of a, in here, it said that the mayor's term takes place 1 week after the election. It's 2 weeks.
Oh, sorry, that was a
2
mistake.
weeks after the election.
Okay.
So you have a
And you would
Tuesday
know.
election, then 2 weeks later on a
Yeah.
Tuesday, you have your
Which
organization.
for a city this size is awfully difficult. And that was one of the other reasons that we looked at the transition provision. Just talking about the 2-year, 4-year conundrum. Hampton has decided to go in that direction. Waterbury has gone in that direction. There's a considerable tail off. There's no doubt, Mayor, you're absolutely right. In the election where the mayor is not running. Hartford moved in this direction, not with the council, but with the Board of Education, having a Board of Education cycle that was off cycle with the remainder of the city officials. And the theory in 2002, when they did this, was, oh, this would be great. All these people would focus on the Board of Education. Most important function, it would be it would be the glory days, gladiators out in the streets trying to make sure they get Board of Education members. They were lucky to get 3,000 voters, 4,000 voters, 6,000 voters. So 20 years later, they've now moved it back into one cycle with the council, and we have to do a stagger to get the to make it work, but it's going to go back into the one cycle. We have talked about having having the alternate election, the concept of having the council in a separate election cycle lends itself to the notion that the council is a legislative body, is an independent body, and should be separated from the top of the ticket, the mayor, the city, the town clerk in this town, and the other officials that remain. But that's really a local call, but we didn't address the term for council in this cycle.
Any other questions at this time?
Can I explain a couple of procedural things? If
Yes.
there are no substantive questions, I just want to talk about where we are. I'm going to repeat something that at least one of the members wasn't here when I spoke to you a year and a half ago or so. So where we are right now is in the process where it's before you. It's your document. And you have two choices. We have a schedule, it's laid out. The schedule is aggressive. The schedule is not giving you all the statutory time. You gave this commission an awful lot of time to deal with the issue of dealing with this charter, which is a big task. It's one of the biggest tasks I've assumed as a lawyer working on charters. But your job now is to make a decision whether there are any recommendations to come back to the commission. If that's what you decide, then at some point in this process, we have the date. I think we have the dates laid out. You will send a series of recommendations back to the commission for their consideration. At that point, if that's what happens, they can only deal with those issues. If Abraham Lincoln came back from the dead and came up with the greatest idea, we could not honor Mr. Lincoln at that moment. We're limited to the recommendations that you make at that point. When they send it back to you in the end, you are then confined to making up or down decisions on either the whole package or parts of the package. So you can vote against portions of the package that will be before you, which includes all the elements that are here tonight, plus whatever elements occur as a result of the dialogue between the two bodies. The first thing that will happen when it comes back, if it comes back, will be a reverse meeting. You'll come to a meeting of the commission and confer with the commission and tell us why you think we need to do A, B, C, D, or E, whatever that may be. If, on the other hand, and then let me just take it out to the end of the process. Then it comes back to you, you make your decision up or down, in totality, up and down, in whole or in part. And then you will approve final report of the commission. That's what they will submit to you. This is specifically called the draft report. And so it's not finalized until either then, and then if you approve it, you then have to approve the questions. That's why we said we didn't want to be presumptuous when the chair asked you to consider the separate question for the 4-year term, but it's not a commission decision. That's a council decision on what the questions will be on the ballot. And I'll work with you to help develop them and look at different models from around the state to develop the best questions possible. And once that's done in August, sometime in August, those questions will go to the town clerk and then to the Secretary of State, and they'll go on the ballot in November. And the only other thing that we would do is the town clerk has the statutory authority to prepare, we have to publish it in the newspaper. We have that newspaper requirement, but we have the ability to do what they call an explanatory text where the city is able to pay for a document that kind of goes through in an anodyne way, in a neutral way, all the provisions and what you've done to change the charter. Back to where we are right now. If at the end of your deliberations now, where we are today, in the next few weeks, you say, we could do this, we could do that, but we think generally it's a good document. We don't want to make any changes. That would convert it into, if you do not make recommendations during that period of time, it converts into a final report. You take final action within this time frame. The likelihood is, and I've said this to the commission, I'm saying this to you, there will be things we need to talk about. We just talked about the dates for the budget. So there are a number of things we will be talking about. I do not anticipate that this is the final report. I do anticipate you'll be deliberating, reviewing. The members will be available. I guess we'll be doing a lot of this on Zoom. We'll be all available working on Zoom. And as I said before, I just tell the president what you guys want to address at the next meeting. He'll make some decisions about how we conduct the meetings, and we'll get you whatever background materials that I provided to the commission, including the one on the terms of office. Any other materials that we have, we'll make sure you have for those discussions.
A quick, just one last question, if I may.
Yes, council member Ed Camacho.
Have you, just out of curiosity, do you have a word count as to like how many words the charter has been condensed to, like how many, what the size of it now is compared to?
I can do that. I haven't done that. Be afraid to look at it.
But is it sizable? Would it be?
I'll count it tonight.
Would it be
I don't have it, but I did.
Well, the computer can do it just by pressing the.
Yeah, my computer's at home.
But I mean, can you?
I'll be happy to do
I
that.
can do it in inches.
Okay, so it's a sizable.
Yeah, look, there are things that are taken out. I think that the body, the way you have to look at it is you have to look at part one. And it's gonna be hard. We'll have to do the whole thing because the problem with your charter, and I was just looking at my presentation that I made to you guys a long time ago. And I just talked about I just had it here. I just pulled it up because I was going to comment on it, but it was supercilious, but I'll do it now. Not so supercilious. The council alone was dealt with in Article 4, Article 15, and in a variety of other places in the charter. So there was not one section where you could look at the council powers and say that's where the council powers are. Same thing was true of the mayor, was in a couple of different articles. The budget was all over the place. Parts of the budget were the Board of Estimate, parts of the budget were the mayor, parts of the budget were here, parts of the budget were in other places. You had taxing district things in the main section of the charter that the council had authority over. And what I've done with those, you will find those in the taxing district section of the charter. So there is a council provision in the taxing district of the charter. If those provisions are still used, they're there. That's the logical place for them. Made no sense to put them anywhere else. So that was the hodgepodge that we were dealing with. So I'll do a word count on the whole thing. numbers of pages, it's still a pretty substantial document, although I think the baseline is under 100 now on the, which is pretty good. Most of my charters are low hundreds. So in terms of the governance section of the charter, it's been compacted quite a bit. But I will do a number count. A word count.
Thank you. That was just a matter of curiosity, but the important thing is that the changes were restructuring the charter so that like things were in similar sections, like in like sections, basically. That was-
Exactly. That was the intent. And I met with the mayor. When I met with
162 pages without the note, the end notes.
Plus they can cut out
Yeah, it's still a pretty substantial document. There's no way to eliminate that. And I think that the taxing districts, if you have friends on the taxing districts, I think that they should really look at their sections.
Yeah.
But as I said, as the chair said in the letter, they need to be very careful when you mess with the special act. We're going through this in the next city on the other side of the border here in Stanford. You need to be very careful about how you conduct surgery on the special act, because if you go too far, you really undermine the special act, and the courts would not look kindly on that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of separate provisions there. I mean,
There's one that's really jumps out at us all the time, and it's a provision for a widow to receive X amount of money every month.
Yes.
She probably hasn't been with us for 70 years, you know? Pardon?
I mean.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
We couldn't include, we took the police and fires pension funds out of the charter because they don't exist. I got confirmation from council to both of those pensions. And so we took those out, which were a lot of pages. I mean, that you might have seen the reduction in pages in part 2 of the charter, part 3 of the charter. We finally concluded that, but with poor Mary, we can't confirm that she's still around or that there's people that are related to her, so she's still in the charter.
We challenged our town clerk to look in the records, and he couldn't.
He couldn't find it. And the other thing,
Probably moved out of town.
in the taxing districts, there's a whole bunch of, anybody know? There's a whole bunch of provisions in taxing districts with dealing with bond issuances from the 1930s. They should all be out of there. I mean, if I hope that during this process, and you guys know people at the taxing districts, be nice to eliminate those provisions if they don't make any sense. If they want to come and say, get them out of there, happy to do it. We did not want to do any surgery on the taxing district. We think they should actually do the first line of
Very wise.
tax in there.
Very wise.
Yeah. And that is numb as I look. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 5 on the agenda, just quickly, these are proposed dates for future meetings, workshops, and Attorney Benton kind of referred to kind of the roadmap ahead. If you can just provide clarity for letters E, I'll say D, E, F, and G, are those like set dates? Because I'm envisioning A, B, and C, we have some flexibility as to when we actually hold the workshop dates, but D, E, F, and G have very specific dates. Are those, I'll say, targeted dates when we need to have work done, July 10th, 17th, 19th, and 26th?
Well, we're working, we're working 2 things. One, you have a maximum time of 60 days here. We're not going to use 60 days because that will take us out too far to get it on the ballot this November. So when we talked about these dates some time ago, I thought we came to these understandings so that the commission would be able to get a report in for the end of July, so that you could act on this at your meeting in August. So
Okay,
we really should lock those dates in
Okay.
as soon as we can. I thought they were locked in, but
all right, that's clear, that's fine. You know, I just want to provide some clarity to the council that
yeah.
these are targeted dates that we're going to try to work towards.
Yeah, and the real key is you have the public hearing scheduled for, we did it after the 4th of July. to have the public hearing and possibly your deliberations that same night or maybe after. That's your call on how you do that. And then you have to have action on the item within 15 days following your public hearing. So this is 7 days, so we're fine. And we're getting close to the 45 days for that 17. So we're really kind of tied in to getting it done within that time frame. If we have to move things around, we can try to do that. I have to balance it with, I have 2 other commissions going as well. I'm trying to keep them all on separate tracks. So we can talk and make sure that works for everybody. We don't have one scheduled for the week of the 18th, which would be our second meeting. We have a meeting for the 12th, but we couldn't do Monday. Remember, we agreed on the Monday night approach, but that's Juneteenth. So we should look at, if we want to do one that week, we should look at another night that week, Mr. President. Because we don't have a firm date that week. We can talk offline on that.
Seeing no other business, Ms. Revolus?
Motion to adjourn?
There's been a motion to adjourn at 9:27. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:27. Thank you.